And welcome back to another edition of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling. I'm your host, Sean Meyers, joined by returning Sean Saputo to the show, showing off his Young Bucks t-shirt here today. We're not going to be talking any Young Bucks, at least I don't think so. Although there was a big event, of course, with New Japan. Maybe we could highlight that briefly. But first thing we're going to be talking about is Monday Night Raw. And the Red Brand, I think, sort of had an interesting week. Where there was a lot of maybe failed attempts to try to generate some new interest with some storylines. Sean, I just want to get your initial reaction before we touch on the Elias and Jinder, Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins match, Kevin Owens and Finn Balor, and then, of course, the storyline developments with Sami Zayn and Bobby Lashley, as well as Constable Corbin. Anything that really jumped out, either good or bad, on Monday for you?
Basically just seemed to me like one of those filler weeks for Monday Night Raw leading up to a pay-per-view. You get the go-home show tomorrow, but it just seemed like one of those filler weeks where they were trying to just scramble, put things together, and piece together a show, and hopefully have more planned for next week. I wasn't gung-ho about a lot of things, wasn't, upset about a lot of things. It was just one of those shows you kind of sit there, you watch through it, and see what they're going to bring for the week. You really don't need a lot of story build, considering the pay-per-view is just 13 days away at that point. The stories have been built. They continue to grow on the Sami Zayn, Bobby Lashley one, which it's weird, but I guess you got to kind of continue to build that one. They did the same thing with Nia and Ronda, and now that whole thing's confusing.
I would agree. I don't think they really knew at all what the game plan was when they started that feud, and I brought up the point that it was sort of difficult to figure out how they would book it, and now it seems like they've hit a point where they, week to week, don't even know what they're trying to put across.
Not even just that, they also don't know if Nia Jax is a heel or a face anymore, because the whole context of her build with Alexa Bliss was to build her as a face, and, the anti-bully, how Alexa Bliss is a bully, this and that, and then, on Raw, not this past week, but the week before, Nia's just completely decimating some poor girl, and then this week, the whole, angle with Natalya, why Natalya is being added to the angle, I understand with the Ronda aspect, but it's so clustered that nobody knows what's going on, and we still have yet to see Ronda wrestle a match since WrestleMania. So, with Nia on the role she's been, it's kind of hard to sit there and think, wow, Ronda even stands a chance in this match.
Well, let me ask you this, going on that. Maybe not just specific to Ronda Rousey and Nia Jax, but really anything in WWE in 2018. Do you like the idea of maybe blurred lines between what is a heel, what is a face, and really giving more complexity to it where it sort of changes? Or do you think that's a negative because most casual fans just end up being confused in the whole scenario? Because to me, what you said with Nia is true. You want to cheer for Nia. The company tries to get you to rally behind her, and then all of a sudden it's gone in a 1 week span, and then there's signs of her being compassionate. Now, I think what's ultimately going to happen this week is we're going to find out that she was not being honest in her compassion and concern about Natalya, and ultimately Nia will be a full-fledged heel once the match happens in 8 days. But do you think that that's something, a recipe that could work, where you sort of go back and forth 1 week to the other where it's not real clear if someone's face or heel, or is that just a failed formula in professional wrestling?
See, for us, I think for the strong viewership, the ones who watch week in and week out, I think it's okay because you can, kind of grasp what's going on, and we have enough knowledge and background watching it every week where we understand the storylines, we understand what's going on. But for, like you said, the casual viewer, which I feel like makes up the majority of the viewership, I don't think it's a good thing. And like you said, because the casual viewer could have watched the build up to WrestleMania and saw that Nia was a part of this whole Alexa Bliss's bullying thing. She's become this soft, sensitive face, crying and everything, upset. And then now,
which seems sort of a mistake from the get-go to me. I mean, I understand it's tough to make someone that's bigger than everyone else the face, but I didn't really like how they approached that, because I think it does long-term damage to a character like her that succeeds as being a dominant force.
Yeah, and then now the casual viewer could have had like a couple months where they didn't watch, and they could just be hopping back in, and now Nia's just completely decimating people and doing what she's been doing, and they're sitting there going, okay, well, wasn't this girl just about like being anti-bully last time with the way she was facing Alexa, and now all of a sudden she's just basically bullying these girls around in the ring?
Right, and then 1 week later it completely reverts back to what she had been before. So
yeah, exactly.
And I don't want to spend too much time on this, but think of it like this: Nia Jax is pretty comparable to Braun Strowman in terms of they are just dominant, they're bigger, they're stronger, they're theoretically better than just about any opponent they're going to go against. They're always going to be the favorite heading into a match. So with Braun, it has worked very well, presenting him not as a sympathetic figure, not as someone that you need to rally behind, but someone that the fans get behind because he's just so dominant, but he does it in, I guess, sort of a clean way. He doesn't need any shortcuts or anything like that. He just goes out there and just asserts his will over his opponent, and it worked. So why they had to go the complete opposite route to try to get fans behind Nia, I feel like if the fans want to get behind someone, they will. You don't need to really manufacture ways that come across as sort of phony or fake. And I think that pretty quickly was exposed. And I remember when she defeated Alexa at, what was it, Backlash, the pay-per-view after WrestleMania, and she cut that promo in the ring. To me, the storyline lost its credibility completely there, because she just did not sound like a person that was speaking from the heart. It sounded very forced. So this whole thing, I think, has been difficult for them to book, and this last week on Raw was another example of them maybe not having the long-term vision from start to finish and sort of just going on the fly each and every week. But I do want to get into something that I thought was pretty good on Monday, and I know we've highlighted in past weeks the ascension of Elias to what is now, I would say, almost the main event picture of Monday Night Raw. Now, he's not competing for the Universal title, but with that title pretty much non-existent on a regular basis, with Brock Lesnar never being around, Elias is now the number one contender for the Intercontinental title, held by Seth Rollins, arguably the top face, or at least one of the top 2 or 3 faces in the company right now. And they furthered that storyline on Monday night, as Elias actually joined with Jinder Mahal, sort of a weird pairing there, but it worked in this sense as they went against Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns. And I think it was pretty good. It unfolded with Elias and Rollins starting off, and then Jinder and Roman got involved. Of course, the Teddy Long reminiscent tag team match was made by Kurt Angle, and these guys ended up getting about half an hour all told from start of the promo between Elias and Rollins to the finish of the first match on Raw. Thought it was a good way to set the tone, and with all the criticism that I think is justly deserved of the creative team and how they mishandle so many people, and we'll get to some of that in a matter of moments, I think that one guy that they have had a slow build, but probably to his benefit with the slow build, has been Elias. They have not thrust him into something he wasn't ready for. They have not overexposed him. They have allowed the fans to build up their, I guess, attachment and interest in him, and now it's paying off in a marquee storyline against Seth Rollins. And I think that most people would say that's a storyline that has been one of their favorites so far in WWE this year.
Yeah, it's played off very well, and it started with a bang too, the whole feud, because Elias, over the past, going back to right before the feud started with Seth Rollins, it was another one of, well, what's he really going to be doing at this pay-per-view? Is he going to have something, or is he just going to sit in the ring and sing again? But the build-up to it was fantastic, him coming out and decking Seth Rollins with the guitar on the announce table to start the whole thing. Really was a great way in doing the start of the feud. And then to have last week that 30-minute exchange in the ring and then the match, I really think it's putting Elias over even more. And down the line, Seth Rollins is in the midst of one of the better runs in recent memory in terms of, what he's done in matches and things like that. So he's going to be back in the main event picture before long. And I think it's a great start to have somebody that has been patiently waiting to get their opportunity to have a marquee match. And I think Elias is the right guy at the right time to put in this match. Now, I don't know if he's going to win. I'm kind of skeptical to say he would this time around, but it's going to be a feud that lasts a couple months, I believe.
Jinder and Roman were the other pieces of this. Any interest whatsoever in terms of those two? Because I know that when you go on the internet, when you go on Twitter during Raw, during SmackDown, during the pay-per-views, you get a pretty good gauge of what the hardcore fans, if you will, not the casual fans, think about different storylines, different guys. Doesn't seem like anyone's really interested in this. And I'm a huge Roman fan, but I do not enjoy Jinder whatsoever. I don't like him on the mic. I don't like his matches. And anyone in the company has to realize that match is going to get a terrible reaction from the crowd, especially in Chicago, but even most of the crowds leading up to it. It's not an interesting storyline. It is the example of what people could point to when they say that WWE wastes talent or miscasts their superstars, to me.
Yeah, it's like, I'm with you. I'm a big Roman fan. I've supported Roman since his days of the Shield, even going back to before he was on the main roster. And Jinder Mahal, I have never been behind from any point of time during both of his WWE runs. And to me, I sit there and I go, okay, well, this storyline just is really whatever. Who cares? They threw it together and this is what we're going to get. Well, as you mentioned, most of, if not 95% of the WWE universe can care less about what's going to happen in this match at the pay-per-view. When this feud has been going on, there have been times the two of them have been in the ring while the entire arena is chanting, "You both suck." So I don't understand how, especially in that point, WWE can continue to go with this and make this a feud with a match in one of its now top 5 pay-per-views. It has no feel. People are going to sit there and just have minimal reaction. And this is the only match I can see where people might just get up and leave. And,
well, they have to sort of put it sandwiched in between some bigger things, I think, right?
This has to be like this match, honestly, and as sad as it is to say, being a Roman fan, this is your bathroom break match. This is a match you put in between 2 title matches or in between both of the Money in the Bank ladder matches.
And hopefully it's not a 20-minute thing,
It just needs to be a 10-minute match and just call it a night.
So let's get to what the final match was on Monday Night Raw. Close it out. I think on paper, pretty nice matchup between Kevin Owens and Finn Balor. Finn Balor seems like a guy that has sort of maybe reinvented himself in the eyes of the company recently. His work with Braun Strowman back-to-back weeks, I think, was a step in the right direction as far as him proving how good he can be and that maybe he could be a world title contender. So Finn gets another main event. This time it's against Kevin Owens. And Owens has been doing a nice job recently. I think he's always a solid guy, both in the ring and in terms of being an interesting character and getting a reaction. The problem I have with how this match unfolded is, much like a lot of Raw, it seems like sort of a bogus finish. I understand you don't want to give away clean finishes each and every week, especially when you have big matchups like this one, but by the same token, the match ends in a disqualification because Kevin Owens just stomps on Finn Balor repeatedly in the corner. That's not going to please anyone, and I know that it's not always the goal of weekly television to please the audience with a good finish, but it seemed like an opportunity where they could have really had a nice send-off and made the show feel like a much better show with a big-time main event and a clean finish. Didn't get that. You get the bogus DQ finish, and people that are already complaining about how Raw had unfolded and been a mediocre show have more ammunition in terms of what they can say fell short. So I like the matchup between the two. I think that those are two guys that should be in the main event. But as far as how it played out, I thought the match left a lot on the table. And maybe we'll see it again in the near future. And if so, then you can maybe see a much more, high caliber match. But this one, just it didn't seem like it did much favors in terms of making Raw seem memorable.
Well, I'm okay with it if it does extend on past Money in the Bank with these two, simply because I think Finn Balor is one of the least utilized guys on the roster in terms of fan favoritism, because I think Finn Balor is one of the best active wrestlers on the Raw roster. And I especially like it because it moves Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn away from each other, and it allows both of them to, profile what they should be in the long haul, and that's singles competitors. And I both think at the main event level. So it moves them away from each other. It allows Kevin Owens to have something to do without having to have Sami Zayn on his side. It has Sami Zayn opposite doing whatever he has to do. And it also is a marquee matchup for Finn Balor, in which he has been, until recently, just left on the wayside. So I like the setup. Again, you would think clean finish. You don't get it. But if that's going to be the case and it's going to lead to something post Money in the Bank, I'm all right with it down the road.
And again, those two guys are matching up. They are two of the four participants on the Raw side for the Money in the Bank ladder match. Of course, the other two, Braun Strowman, Bobby Roode, they also had a match. That one, man, it wasn't much of a match. Braun Strowman dominated. Bobby Roode just seems like a guy that doesn't really have much going on, and maybe we'll get into that on a later segment when we go trending topics. But as we stick with the Raw recap here, you'd mentioned Sami Zayn. You'd mentioned how he and Kevin Owens have been split up. They're doing their own things. Well, Sami Zayn is doing his own thing, and that's not a great thing in many people's eyes right now. The feud with Bobby Lashley has been horrendous, I would say would be an accurate term for how most people would describe it. That being said, I will try to put a positive turn on this. The writing has been, I think, intentionally bad with how they've set up this storyline. The segments that they've had back and forth have just been terrible. But I think for some reason that's sort of been the intention of the creative, starting with Bobby Lashley talking about his sisters in that sit-down interview with Renee, and then Sami Zayn bringing out the fake sisters. Well, now he brings up Bobby Lashley's Instagram, saying that Bobby Lashley is fake in that regard, so on and so forth. So they continue with this, and ultimately what it led to was another showdown simply on the mic between these two on Raw. Sami Zayn, however, and this picture is worth 1,000 words here, I think he has come across as very talented in terms of just his facial expressions, a little bit of comedic value added in. He is, to me, impressed in this storyline. And I say that knowing that they've given really bad material and he's made the best of it. No one's going to look at this, I don't think, and say this is a good storyline, this is a good feud. But I think you can look at it and say Sami Zayn is showing me a lot here. We always know he's a great in-ring guy, and we know he could sort of play the underdog in NXT to perfection, but now he's playing this heel that's just stabbing every now and then at Bobby Lashley, throwing these little jabs in there, and I think he's doing it pretty well. And I would say Lashley has fallen short in his storyline and his part, but Sami Zayn has certainly gone above and beyond, and I think if you really look at it, it could help him long term.
Yeah, I agree. I love what Sami's been doing on the mic. Again, the content not what you want out of it. You would kind of like something different in terms of the build-up, but I think it's a way for them to try to get fans even more behind Sami Zayn, for them to have a reason to give him a stronger push than just, being a guy that was kind of left on the sidelines like he was in SmackDown, not getting a lot until that whole feud with Daniel Bryan and Shane McMahon. But the Bobby Lashley point, I think the issue that a lot of fans have is he was expected to be in high-profile matches, feuds, when he came back. And when he came back, fans were excited. But WWE hasn't done anything to warrant really what Bobby Lashley was before he had left, and then what he did after he left at Impact. I mean, he was a force at Impact. And right now you're just getting this gun-shy, quiet Bobby Lashley, which was never really his character to begin with, even in his first run at WWE.
When you look at him now, doesn't he seem like basically a bigger version of Apollo Crews? I mean, he comes out, he's smiling, he doesn't really show anything, just a big smile every week.
That's what I mean, and it's not what he was before, and I just think Sami Zayn, again, you mentioned it, great in-ring. He's done fantastic on the mic with what he's been giving. But I don't think this is where a feud needed to start for Bobby Lashley.
Well, Sean has seemingly dipped out on us here momentarily. We'll see if we can get him back here. One final thought on this feud between Bobby Lashley and Sami Zayn is that, we'll have to still ultimately wait and see how the match unfolds. That's going to be a big takeaway, is if they can deliver a great match, I think maybe you forgive and overlook some of these shortcomings. But if the match is sort of along the same lines of what the build has been, then ultimately I think this is going to be one of the worst feuds that WB has in 2018. So we'll have to wait and see, but at least for now, you have to wonder, is this going to go down as an infamous feud here in 2018, at least for the first 3 or so weeks, with the interaction on the mic certainly seems as such. Let's see if we can get Sean Saputo back in here as we transition to one other aspect here of Raw this past week. We will be talking about Baron Corbin and his role on Monday Night Raw, now taking over as the Constable. I think something that I don't know that this is going to work long term. It seems like sort of a short-sighted way to get Baron Corbin involved in some storylines. As Sean Saputo back in the house. Sean, apologize for that technical mishap momentarily. Glad that you're back alive and well. I just transitioned quickly to Baron Corbin and now the Constable on Monday Night Raw. Man, this seems like something that is not going to turn out to be a long-term success. I don't see Baron Corbin as the type of guy that really can fill a role like this. I just don't think he's entertaining enough. Maybe he'll surprise me. Him and Kurt Angle, that interaction, I think it's going to be sort of awkward. So I don't see, other than a lack of any storyline for Baron Corbin, why they came up with this idea for him in particular. It just doesn't seem like a good fit. We'll see how long it lasts. I mean, it's better than him doing nothing. But ultimately, I'm not sure that Baron Corbin, Kurt Angle, back and forth all the time in backstage segments is really the right recipe and going to have the right chemistry.
No, I was hoping when Baron Corbin came to Monday Night Raw, he would have a fresh start and continue the dominance he had at the beginning of his run in WWE, and then he kind of fizzled off, I guess, got under the skin of some important people in the back, but it's very weird and not a character that I think Baron Corbin can play well. He plays that I don't care about anybody character way too well. And I think that's the road they need to just continue to take with him and just freshen it up a little bit. But this isn't the way that you're going to freshen up this character for Baron Corbin.
You know, ironically, when he first came out this past Monday, he interrupted the, oh God, I'm drawing a blank here. It was the Kurt Hawkins trying to break the losing streak. He was closing in on 200 losses. And so he was teasing that he was going to finally end the streak. He was going against a local jobber, oddly enough, named James Harden. I don't really understand the whole reason behind that. But I actually thought Corbin coming out and ruining that's kind of how I would present Corbin all the time. Hey, some jerk that comes out and spoils things. I'm fine with that. But then you say, oh, well, now he's an authority figure and he's going to be interacting with Kurt Angle. And then he said, oh, you have to take away the women's victory for the faces, Sasha, Bayley. I don't want to see Baron Corbin doing stuff like that. You know, he's not a guy. Sometimes, I'll give you an example. Go back 6 months. A guy like maybe an Enzo Amore, who struggles in the ring a little bit, but he's this great character and entertaining. He could make something like that work. That's a good role for someone like him. Baron Corbin should almost be the exact opposite, I would think, where you don't want him constantly talking and you know, maybe being exposed for his lack of verbal skills and his lack of personality. You want him being a big jerk that comes out, has, you know, emphatic victories, maybe quicker matches, and does some stuff like he did to Kurt Hawkins, but not necessarily seeing him on camera 5 or 6 or 7 times each and every week.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. It's weird, and I want exactly what you're talking about. That dominant guy that came out had pretty strong, like, you know, 8 to 10 minute matches on live TV, and then, you know, maybe put on a decent to pretty good 15-minute match at a pay-per-view. So, excuse me, that's where I'd like to see Baron Corbin end up down the line. I mean, they said they had big plans for him when he got the Monday Night Raw. I hope this isn't the big plan.
I was going to say, I hope that's not what they were referring to.
Yeah, and who knows, down the line it could eventually lead to him getting a marquee match against Kurt Angle, something like that.
We shall see. Certainly week 1, so you don't want to completely pass judgment, but Baron Corbin now, Constable Corbin, figures like he's going to have an increased role, at least backstage, each and every week on Monday Night Raw. That's going to do it for the Raw recap version of this week's edition of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling. Keep in mind, we'll be back with the SmackDown summary momentarily, and then later we'll have the trending topics. I think a pretty interesting idea. We're going to discuss who we would change from face to heel or heel to face, and exactly how we would go about doing it. But that's later on in this edition of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling. For now, we'll sign off on the Raw recap. For my partner, Sean Saputo, Sean Meyers, saying goodbye. We'll be back momentarily with the SmackDown summary right here on the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling.